I want you guys to kind of brush up on your editing skills. I want you to look at the sort of using digital graphics in editing. So I'm making this kind of tutorial to help you do that. So yeah, start Premiere Pro and then name your project. This one is called Pop Buzz for YouTube because this project is going to be suitable for YouTube. Now, within a Premiere Pro project, okay, the timeline itself has a certain kind of format in terms of whether it's portrait, in terms of whether it's landscape. And the easiest way to actually get a Premiere Pro project to be the right format is to actually import a bit of footage that you're going to use to edit, okay, and then make sure you choose the right one. So because this is YouTube, I've just deleted the one that was in portrait and I'm going with my landscape clips. Once I drop a landscape clip into the into that timeline there, like I've just done, that timeline then becomes exactly the same format in terms of the resolution of it, the width and the height becomes exactly the same format as the footage that I'm using. Okay, so I'm importing all of my assets, and this folder that I'm using here, where I'm collecting all this stuff from, where all these graphics are, I've actually zipped this folder up along with this Premiere Pro project minus the video of Justin that we took yesterday, and you will have access to all of these different things. So the Pop Buzz templates, Illustrator document is just a white frame. There is this Getting a Career in Media title, which because it's a font that is very specific to a Mac, I've actually also put that into Adobe Illustrator and then exported it as a PNG. Essentially, if you create a shape or a font or a logo or anything in Illustrator and you export it as a PNG, then when you use that in Premiere Pro, you will find that it is the right it is a see-through bit of film. So just to quickly go back on this bit then, so I've got all my assets there. I'm importing all the titles that I want, okay? And I've also imported the Pop Buzz Guide logo. So the next thing that I'm doing is just moving those graphics across into my timeline, okay? So I start with the Pop Buzz Guide logo, but as you can see, it's obscuring Justin's face. So what I'm going to try and do is move the logo and the writing so that they sit, so the logo sits in the bottom right-hand corner, and the title, Getting a Career in Media, is going to sit in there. So if I double-click on the Pop Buzz Guide PNG, and I go into effect controls in my kind of control window in the top left there, you'll see that I can move it up, down, left, right. And I can also, there's all these things like position, scale, rotation. You know, you can use all of these settings to kind of move your graphics on the screen where you want them. That graphic doesn't move at the moment. So once you place it in a certain area, it will be there and it will be there for as long as that clip is on the screen for, okay? So I'm just with the Pop Buzz Guide, I'm going to move it there. Look, I'm moving it down, I'm shrinking it down, okay, and I'm moving it over and I'm placing it in there. And you need to, when you're doing this, you need to also be aware of any other margins. Now, I've noticed with a lot of Pop Buzz media, they often have a frame around the edge, okay? It's a very simple rectangle with about a 0.6 thickness stroke, and that is often something that will appear and be drawn from top left to right. So that's a technique that I'm going to show you how to do as well in this video. But at the moment, you can see I'm just tweaking the position. Every time I want to tweak the position of something, I'm just clicking on it in the timeline. That's the purple box that you can see there. Double click on it and then open up effect controls, and then you can scale it, you can position it, you can basically put it wherever you want. And I'm just kind of moving it around the screen until I get it into a nice position that works with the framing of the video that I've got. Now, you guys might not have a center frame like this. In fact, the rushes here is not particularly very well shot piece because it's just quite boring. It's on a simple white background. You know, you guys probably may have chosen a bit more sensibly in your rushes, but it's just an example. The main thing I want you to focus on here is how the graphics are manipulated. So I've imported these PNGs. I've then moved them into the right place, okay? And then if I want to make that kind of transition, I can use the same transitions I would use in videos. So for example, a radial wipe, is a wipe that goes around in a clockwise direction that you often see with the Pop Buzz frames, actually. But if I was to apply it, for example, you see how it says FX is green there on the bottom? I've applied that to the Pop Buzz Guide logo. So if I now double click on the, and it's just drag and drop, all I've just done is go to the effects tab, search for radial wipe. I've added that radial wipe there, and this transition completion button, if you press this button here to toggle the animation, it will then set that as a keyframe. That means that at that point in time, that is going to be either 0% or 100%. And having just done it there, you can see what the effect is. So if I make it 100% at the very beginning of the video, then as I move it, it then completes to 0%. It goes from 100 to 0 between that keyframe and the next bit. What that means is that graphic there will then have a clockwise sort of radial wipe. And I can also apply that to the next title as well. Again, go back to effect controls, click on the radial wipe, click the create keyframe button, which is that little stopwatch, okay? Then if I make that 100%, so obviously when it's 0%, it's where it is. And if it's 100% at the beginning of that clip, you'll see how the timeline is moving there. Okay, then it applies that transition to the actual graphic itself. Okay, so that then makes the graphic have a bit of motion. Now you can experiment with different transitions if you want to try different things. The only reason I've chosen a radial wipe is because of my observations from a Pop Buzz guide where they did that with the frame that the guy was framed in. So to make a frame, I want to put a frame around this sort of frame, if you like, a frame within a frame. So to make any additional graphics, you'll need to use our old friend Adobe Illustrator. Now, Adobe Illustrator can be really useful in that it will actually create for you an actual graphic that you can then export as a PNG, which will have some transparency to it. Okay, so that's organizing assets. That's the first video. So the next stage then, let's say, as I just said, if you want to make another piece of graphics, you'll have to use Illustrator. So let me just share the next video. Hopefully this should work. There you go, making graphics. Okay, so you should be able to see this now. I'm basically in the same place I was when I left off. So I'm just going to my applications and I'm just opening Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so there you go, double click, open Adobe Illustrator. And again, you know, Adobe Illustrator might take a little bit of time to load. Just be patient. Patience is a virtue. If you've got a Mac, you can do that and go over to the thing to see the graphic popping up and down while you peruse the meaning of life, the universe and everything. But yes, so I've got my sort of screen graphics in there. I've got my title, which is the title, incidentally, Getting a Career in Media, was also just something that I made in Adobe Illustrator. Part of the reason for doing that is because I'm not sure whether every computer will have that particular font, and that font looks very similar to the font that is used in Pop Buzz. And rather than just type it as a text on Adobe Premiere Pro, if you're not sure whether another computer is going to have that font, then you're better off typing the title slide into Adobe Illustrator and then making it as a graphic. So Illustrator's just booted up, but how do I know that Illustrator is going to be the right size canvas or artboard, as it's called in Illustrator? Sorry, we don't have canvases in Illustrator, we have artboards. So just going to recap on that bit, just going to rewind a minute. So Illustrator loads up. Okay, there we go. Choose Create New. Then, in order to get the right settings, you need to go back to Adobe Premiere Pro. And this box that's in front of you here says Sequence Settings. Now, on the Sequence Settings, it tells you what settings the sequence are. These settings here, where it says frame size 1280 and horizontal, 1280 horizontal and 720 vertical, 16:9 ratio, those settings come from the actual fact that the sequence has been changed depending on the footage that was dragged into it. So because I filmed on an iPhone and because I filmed in landscape, what's happened is when I've dragged that first piece of footage into my timeline, the sequence has been set to that. So if I then want to make an Adobe Illustrator document that will fit into that frame, whether it's graphics, whether it's a shape that you want on the screen or a logo or anything you want, you need to make sure that the preset details here, when you go to new document in Illustrator, are set to the right size, okay? And the PopBuzz Templates AI file is also in the folder for you guys to access, okay? So this is a very simple white artboard here, okay? Make sure when you're working in Illustrator on something, you always save as, so you don't lose what you've got. Otherwise, you'll end up with lots of things called untitled, untitled 2. So call it PopBuzz YouTube frame, for example. Save it, click OK, and then you are looking at an artboard. In order to make a frame within a frame, it's a very simple rectangle, and it'll be a rectangle with no fill and with a stroke. If it's a stroke is like the outline, and the thickness of that is dictated by the points. So if I start off by just drawing a rectangle, then I go to the align settings, place that into the center of the artboard, and so I align it vertically and align it horizontally. That's a fairly simple thing to do. And then I'm looking at my fill color and my stroke color, okay? So if I put the stroke at white, and then I make the thickness of that stroke, let's say 9 points, I can then export it, and I can export it as a PNG, which will come out with a transparent background. Tick the use artboards function and click export. Now the problem with that is it gives you a little preview, which is quite useful because I can see there I accidentally put a fill color in. What you actually want is a no color, so that's that little box with a red cross in it, okay? So you have that as your fill color, it's transparent. And then if you look at the export settings now, when I go export as PNG and I look at the artboard, you see the preview. The preview looks like it is just a simple white rectangular frame, okay? So these are the kind of assets that you may want to create if you're going to make graphics on your video. So now I've created that PNG, I then simply import it into PopBuzz. As I say, all of this stuff that I'm importing from this folder is going to be available for you guys to play with. So following this, as part of your kind of skills builds task today, I would ask you all to just have a little play around with how you manipulate graphics on screen. As you can see there, I've got a frame, makes it look a bit more professional. It also makes it look a bit more in the house style of a sort of PopBuzz piece of media. So yeah, again, with the frame, if you want to edit anything with it, you need to double click into the purple line there. If I apply a radial wipe to that frame, I can get the effect that I've seen in a couple of PopBuzz videos before, okay, where the frame kind of gets drawn in a clockwise direction, okay? So if you apply a radial wipe to that, go into the editing function, and then you'll see the radial wipe there on the left-hand side. Again, click the little stopwatch for transition completion. My playhead is at the beginning, so obviously at the beginning I want it to be 100%, which means there's nothing on there. And then as that transition completes, the frame will get drawn to 100%, depending on, if you go from 100 to 0, as I've just done there, you'll see that that frame gets drawn very quickly before the other graphics are drawn on the screen, okay? This is quite a lot, I understand, for you guys to get your head around, but I thought it better to kind of talk you through the process and show you how it works on the screen so that you can all have a play with it and try and help improve your understanding of how graphics are used in films. Now, the very last bit that I'm going to put in here is a Global Academy logo. It's called stacked white.png because it's the stacked white logo, meaning it's global on top of Academy rather than global next to Academy. And you can see it's massive, it's huge, it's much bigger than the screen. So I go into, double click on the actual graphic itself there in the timeline and click on effect controls and go into the scale. Now, if I want that to scale up from nothing or to move on the screen, I can actually use the scale. And again, that little stopwatch function there allows me to say what scale I want it to be at a particular point in time. So if I want it to go from 0% up to 34%, I just click on the stopwatch and then roll back the playhead from the start of that graphic to the end of it. And then you'll get an effect very much like you can see on the screen there. where you've got the Global Academy logo coming in. I can also then put a radial wipe on that. You can apply basically any kind of transition that you would normally see in a piece of video to any asset that you've got on the timeline in Premiere Pro. Okay, so with this one, I've applied a scale transition, so I've made the logo scale up, and now I'm applying a radial transition. So not only will it scale up, it will actually disappear by being wiped out with radial. So it comes on the screen, then it radials out, and then that will match the transition of the actual frame as well. So again, and you can see it's not quite wiped out there, because actually at the end of it, it's gone to 97% and not 100. So make sure you get those things right. Test them, look at them, see if the graphic works. Then if I want to get rid of the frame, I double click back on the actual frame graphic, go back into effect controls, click on my radial wipe and turn the transition completion. That little button I just clicked there was to add a keyframe to tell it that it's 0% at that point. Move the playhead along, make it 0%, and then you have the logo come in, the logo radial out, and then the actual graphic frame radial out, although it's not radialed out 100% because, look, accidentally it's stopped at 88%. So in order to rectify that issue, what I need to do is go to the point in the playhead where it stops at 88% and then just dial that up to 100, and it will all completely disappear. And the end result will be that. So when you've done all that, you're then kind of ready to export. But I'm not going to go through exporting right now because I think you guys have probably got enough to play about with that. So it only really leaves me to show you exactly where to find all these assets, okay? So I'm going to... How do I stop sharing my window? I've already stopped sharing it. Yeah, I have. Okay. This video will be available on Canvas. The other thing is... Yeah, sorry, I'm just catching up with the chat. Yes, Callum, you're right about modifying any video proportions sequence-wise. What I would suggest is that the best thing you can do is make sure that your sequence is actually set to the video that you're importing. So where you film stuff in portrait and in landscape, the first thing to do is just import that particular specific video before you put anything else onto the timeline. And then when you drag the clip, whether it's portrait or landscape, into your sequence, it will turn that sequence into the setting for the video that you're working with, okay? So you need to make sure that you save two different Premiere Pro projects, one as a YouTube video, which will be the landscape one, and one as a TikTok, which will be portrait, okay? So I have created a whole bunch of assets for you to use, right? So you don't have to, you can use this template if you want. There's one for TikTok and there's one for what's it called, YouTube, okay? I've put that on Canvas, so I will once again share my screen with you so you guys can see where it is. I'm also going to drop it after this as an announcement for you guys. So let's just share my screen. So again, I'm looking at Canvas the same way you guys would look at it. If you go into files, you'll see that there is a Premiere Pop Buzz Premiere. Goodness me. This is the test of a TV presenter, isn't it? Enjoy. A Pop Buzz Premiere Pro template. It's a tongue twister. Here, it's only 14.2 megabytes. But the important thing, if you're going to use this, is when you download it, it is a zip file. Right. So when you download it, it's very important that you don't only download it, but you actually then right click on it and you unzip it before you can use it, okay? For those of you that don't know how to unzip folders that have got a zip on, then you need to learn. Essentially just right click on the folder and then click unzip, and it will turn it into an actual folder, which is the same folder that I've been using on my desktop. So I'm downloading this one right now, as you can see, on my web browser. And in a minute, I will stop sharing my web browser and I will share my desktop, and I will show you guys how to actually, manipulate that. Okay. So if we just unshare that, then I share my screen. Cool, you should see my screen now. So your Pop Buzz folder has been zipped, and it will be probably in your downloads folder. Okay. If you've got a zipped folder like this, you need to right click on it and then open it, usually with an archive utility, and it will turn it into this folder. As you can see on this folder, there is a folder of graphics. You've got the frames that I've exported in that tutorial. You've got a TikTok frame. You've got a YouTube frame. You've got a stacked white Global Academy logo. You've got two different titles that say how to get a career in media. One is just a white title without a drop shadow. The other one's got a bit of drop shadow because I know that some people's footage, you'll need something to make that text stand out a little bit more. But again, you can pretty much do all of that in post. So if you do want to add drop shadows and stuff, you can go back into these AI or Adobe Illustrator documents, and you can even like use them to manipulate them. The most important thing is that you download the zip folder and that you unzip it before you start to use it. Okay, so right then, so yes, quite a lot to take in there. Let's just take a quick breather, have a bit of coffee. Okay, on the chat then. Do we get given the Pop Buzz logo as an asset? So hopefully I've dealt with that. You've got every single thing that you need, including the Premiere Pro project that I've just shown you, that you can use as a template. And you will find that in the files section on Canvas. To make it easier, I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you guys can literally get straight to it. So all Prem Pro templates are here. Okay, all Premplo templates, including logos, frames, etc. are here. Okay, so you've got the Premiere Pro files there for you guys to use as kind of a template if you want to have a go at just, even if you haven't got any footage and your group hasn't necessarily shared it on OneDrive with you yet, what I would recommend is spend today having a look at how you manipulate graphics on the screen. So even if you get to the point today where you've figured out how to make the frame graphic do the transition that it appears that I've shown you today. On the template, when you open it, you'll see that those graphics already have the motion involved. So if you need to sort of interrogate how that works by going into effect controls and, you know, just moving the timeline playhead backwards and forwards so you can kind of see how it works, and that'll be fine. Obviously, you know, when you guys get back to school, if you've got any other questions about editing techniques like that, you can ask me. I would imagine you'll need to devote most of Wednesday though to making sure that you actually get the stuff done. Okay,